Happy Arvo. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you guys doing? I feel like today's topic is a little bit contentious, a little controversial. I'm a little bit nervous to be making the video. But hey, I react to something about Australia every single day. Well, every weekday. And this caught my eye today. Do Australians have a right to freedom of speech? I don't know. I do not know. Now, of course, freedom of speech, even over here in America, is kind of a complicated thing, and a lot of people here in America have no idea what their rights actually are when it comes to freedom of speech. I've noticed two different main things. It's people either think that freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of hate speech or freedom to be an asshole. And it's like, yeah, it does. It does. Definitely does. That's actually kind of the point. Like, that's what the freedom of speech is. You don't need freedom of speech to protect speech, everybody, people being nice. It's there to protect when people don't agree with what you have to say. That's the whole idea. So yeah. But there are limitations, like over here. I have it pulled up. Like a threat. A threat. What is an illegal threat in America? Something that you can say. It's speech that comes out of your mouth, and it can be illegal. But it has to be very particular. It has to, fit all these conditions of, issuing a warning that you're going to harm or kill somebody. The statement has to be taken or intended as true. It has to be intended as true, not just taken as true. The person saying it has to mean it, which is really hard to prove. But the point of that is, like in a video game, if you say something or whatever, if you're just messing around, hyperbole doesn't count. The person threatened has to believe it was imminent and unconditional. And the person has to actually fear for their safety. But under all those conditions, that speech is illegal. So there are limitations to freedom of speech. And I feel like that gets really, really confused. And it is kind of confusing over here in America. But where is that line drawn in Australia? I would love to know. And today, hopefully I'm going to get that answer. The Law Society of New South Wales. Check them out, link down below.
Australia is a democratic country, and most Australians grow up thinking we have a right to free speech. Kids start using the phrase from primary school age, mostly to defend their experimental use of naughty words. You can't tell me to go to my room. I have a right to freedom of speech.
That's kind of funny. That's another thing over here in America. People get it confused. Like, they think just because they have a freedom of speech means they're protected from someone saying something back to them. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you have the freedom to say it, but I have the freedom to say how I feel about you saying that. And especially as parents, you have, your kids aren't free to just say whatever they want to you without repercussions, like being punished. It's for the government.
But is that really true? In America, the US Constitution includes a Bill of Rights that explicitly protects freedom of speech. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Perhaps Aussie kids got the idea from watching American TV shows that we also have a right to freedom of speech. But Australian law is quite different. Do we have a right to free speech in Australia? The simple answer is no. Australia has no Bill of Rights and no explicit right to freedom of speech in our Constitution. The High Court has recognised that our Constitution implies a right to free speech.
That's interesting.
When we're talking about political matters.
Okay, only about political matters. Which is, of course, a really important, especially in a democracy. That's vital.
Important cases in the 90s. The High Court of Australia noted that our Constitution requires the government to be elected by its people. Therefore, in order to make informed electoral choices and for Australian democracy to function, those people need to be able to freely discuss their thoughts and opinions on politicians, policies and parties. The High Court later narrowed this implied right in the case of Lang. The implied freedom simply works to prevent the government from making laws that would threaten political communication. So any law that takes away that freedom would be unconstitutional.
What the court, in sort of a series of cases, developed an implied freedom, and they looked at the system of government that the Constitution sets up. And they saw that the Constitution sets up a democratically elected House of Representatives and a Senate. They saw that the Constitution sets up a system of amendment for the Constitution, which requires a referendum, so for the people to go and vote. And the Constitution also sets up a system whereby the government sits in the Houses of Parliament.
That's a really cool thing about Australian law, by the way.
And must answer questions and be what we call responsible to the Parliament. So the court looked at all of these structures and thought, you know, in order to make these structures work, there needs to be a freedom to talk about political matters.
There are some protections of free speech under
That makes sense. And to be able to talk about it without any restrictions, that makes sense.
international law. Article 19 of the UN's International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights states that everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. However, while the convention provides guidance to our government, it's not technically binding law unless Australia adopts the provisions into our own domestic law, which we haven't done. There are also a number of laws that prohibit some types of speech and could be seen as interfering with free speech. These include criminal laws, secrecy laws, contempt laws, anti-discrimination laws, media and telecommunication laws, information laws, intellectual property laws. Anti-discrimination laws do protect people from discrimination, but they...
See, a lot of those apply here in America too. So it is a little bit more complicated than it might seem on the surface.
They also restrict free speech by making it unlawful to say things that could offend, intimidate, or harass people based on things like race, age, gender, or disability. In other words, we have a freedom of expression, but not a freedom to offend.
Australia.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
In law and frankly in international law, human rights.
See, that's probably the line, the distinction to be made right there. Over here in America, you're free to be a freaking Nazi. You know what I mean? You are. Now, everybody should hate you, and most do for it, but you're free to do it.
Sometimes come into tension with each other.
And by Nazi, I wonder if that would be protected in Australia because it's a political thing. But I mean, not just a Nazi, but also like, you know, you're free to say what you think about. If you hold racist views, you can say them to people's faces. Now, maybe those people should have the right to punch you in the face. I don't know.
So my right to do one thing sometimes rubs up against your right to be protected from something. And that's really important then that we try and find the right balance between those two things. If one person's free speech extends beyond just participating in public life and debate and goes into making not just insults, but really serious, harmful insults on the basis of a person's race, that is the point where the law steps in.
What's difficult about that is what does that exactly mean? You know what I mean? It's held up to, or it's kind of vague. A lot of discretion being made by the judge and the prosecutors.
And it does because it's focusing on the harm experienced by that other person.
In the absence of a Bill of Rights, Australians' right to free speech is limited and precarious, if you can say that we have a right at all. There are many exceptions to the implied right, and kids, there's even a law that can make you a criminal for swearing. What we can...
I want to read that. What is that?
And kids, there's even a law.
A person must not use offensive language in or near or within hearing from a public place or school. Offensive language. 6 penalty units. Uh-oh. What are those? I don't know what that is. A penalty unit. Okay.
that can make you a criminal for swearing.
But that kind of, what's interesting is in public schools, there's no freedom of speech, which is always interested me. Obviously, a school wouldn't really function with a bunch of 12-year-olds going around saying F you to their teachers. It just wouldn't function. So that makes a lot of sense that there's no freedom of speech in a public school. But it is a public school funded by the government. So that's just one kind of interesting exception here in America.
What we can take away from all this is that the unanimous decision in the High Court provided some certainty to free political communication in Australia. However, in the absence of a Bill of Rights, the Australian government can pass new laws that override that implied freedom. So, depending which way you look at it, Australians' right to free speech either relies on or is at the mercy of our government.
Wow, very fascinating. I think it's a fascinating topic, and to be honest, I hate that it's such like a political, I don't know, over here in America, it's actually kind of funny. Free speech when I was growing up was always like a left-leaning thing. You know, the Republicans were trying to ban violent video games and stuff, and music, and now it's like a right-leaning thing. I don't know. It's so stupid to me. It just goes to like everybody's in favor of free speech until the other people that they don't like start saying things they don't like. I just think it's a fascinating subject. But I am very curious to see what you guys think. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow.